The wind screamed across the shivering sea, gathering shards of moonlit ice from the floes and hurling them against the black stones of Eastwatch by the sea. It was a wind pulled from the lungs of winter itself, sharp, pitiless, and unending. Yet it carried something colder still upon its breath tonight, something that even the oldest rangers could not name without letting their voices tremble. Some swore they heard faint chimes of glass within that gale, as though a million frozen bells rang against one another in a song too ancient for mortal tongues. Others spoke of a smell like grave-damned roses, the scent that clings to crypts long sealed. But none doubted the dread it bore, for the wall itself seemed to groan beneath its passing, ripples of hoarfrost blooming across its vast face like veins of ghostly fire. On the narrow platform high atop the scarp of ice, Benjen Stark pressed a fur-lined glove to the rim of his hood, anchoring it against the gust. His dark hair danced like raven's wings about a face still untouched by the hardships that would one day carve it into the weathered lines of the first men. Below him, the world ended in black water and crashing white. Yet in the distance, upon that same water's mirrored skin, he glimpsed movement where none had right to be. Lanterns. No, not lanterns. Pinpricks of pallid blue, shifting as though borne aloft by invisible hands. Benjen blinked, and the lights were gone. Only breakers rolled beneath the moon. A lie of the night, he told himself. Yet his hand found the hilt of his sword regardless. To the west, the horizon glimmered in softer hues, for dawn would come soon, though the sun's reach rarely warmed this far-flung corner of the world. Behind him, the hulking mass of Eastwatch crouched at the foot of the wall like an iron toad, its watchfires sputtering in defiance of the wind. Somewhere within those walls, old Cotter Pike cursed at the failing shutters and the men who could not mend them, while ravens huddled in their rookery pens, wings quivering in disquiet. Benjen turned from the sea and trudged toward the lift, boots crunching on the frost-slick boards. His breath wreathed him in silver, ghost lights on the water. The tale would earn him laughter at the morning hearth, no doubt. A green boy's fancy, Pike would claim. Yet the watch had always kept such fancies close, for north of the wall, fancies birthed corpses. The lift's chains clattered, lowering him toward the yard. He stepped out among half-frozen drifts and nodded to the brothers standing guard. Sleep-soft men blinking away dreams of warmer lands. "The sea is restless," Benjen said, pitching his voice above the gale. "And the wind keens like a widow. Double the watch till dawn." The men obeyed without question. Fear moved them faster than orders. Benjen watched from beneath the shadow of his cowl as they scurried along the parapets, torches flaring in their fists. Only when they vanished into the gloom did he exhale, feeling the cold settle deeper into his bones. It would be a long night. Far to the south, beyond the snows and silent pines, banners of crimson and gold snapped in a gentler breeze. Dragonstone's towers loomed over Blackwater Bay, stern and watchful, while upon the island's god's-forsaken yards boys in red gold surcoats drilled beneath Lord John Cunnington's all-seeing eye. Gouts of sweat darkened their armpits and streaked their cheeks, though autumn's chill nipped at every exposed finger. Rebellion tore the realm like meat from bone, and Dragonstone meant to feed the war its fill. Within the fortress's ancient chambers, Rhaegar Targaryen lingered at a mullioned window, pale hands clasped behind his back. Rain streaked the glass like molten lead, blurring the world beyond into a smear of grays. A harp rested on a nearby table, its silver strings humming softly whenever a draft slipped through the shutters. The crown prince's face, beautiful and severe, reflected faintly upon the pane. In that ghostly double he sought answers, but the mirror world spoke only in riddles. A soft step behind him. "My prince." Ser Arthur Dayne's voice held that familiar mix of reverence and unease. Reverence for the man, unease for the heavy crown of expectations weighing upon his brow. Rhaegar turned. "The Dornish host assembles," Dayne continued, "and Lord Cunnington reports success in marshalling the Crownlands. Yet news from the north. Troublesome, yes?" Rhaegar's lips curved in a smile that died too swiftly. "Lord Stark marches beneath the direwolf still, and Baratheon beneath the crowned stag. Whispers claim they rode late into the snows for reasons none can name." Dayne hesitated, Some speak of ancient powers waking in the frost. Old Nan's tales carried south on frightened tongues. The wall unsettles them. Ghost stories. Rieger's gaze returned to the window, though his eyes no longer fixed upon the rain. Yet the wall itself is no ghost, and if it trembles, so too may the realm. Your Grace. Dane rarely misspoke, but in private he addressed Rieger by the style he believed would soon be his due. Rieger merely shook his head. A song of ice and fire, the prophecy murmured, as persistent as wind beneath doors. But prophecy could not save the realm if armies failed. Let the maesters ponder omens. He would see to steel and flesh. Still, he could not wholly dismiss the dread creeping south on winter's heels. Letters arrived from Castle Black, terse, uneasy. Lord Commander Corgyle hinted at losses beyond the woods, of rangers swallowed by storms that walked, and of footprints etched in rhyme unlike any man's. Rieger knew myth when he read it, yet something colder than myth breathed between those lines. And if myth now gripped the north by the throat, the dragons of old Valyria would be hard-pressed to answer. He pressed fingers to the window until the chill of the glass numbed his skin. Somewhere beyond the storm, rock-solid certainties crumbled beneath white shadows. He felt the tremor as surely as a harp felt a plucked string. "Send word to my father," Rieger said at last. "We may need allies older than House Targaryen." Ser Arthur's violet eyes widened, but he bowed all the same. "As you command." On the other side of the realm, the quiet wolf paced a muddy yard outside stony September. Eddard Stark's brow glistened with rain, and his breath smoked even at midday. Dire wolves adorned the cloaks of men surrounding him. Sturdy northerners wielding pikes spotted with rust and arrows fletched with crow feathers. They had marched from the neck beneath banners stitched by hearth wives, leaving frost-kissed fields behind, trusting in his honor more than the promises whispered by nobles. Yet as Ned wiped rain from his eyes, he wondered whether he led them to glory or to doom. Across the square, Robert Baratheon bellowed laughter loud enough to shake pigeons from the eaves. The rebel lord hoisted a cask of sour red above his bearded head, or what remained of the cask, shards flying as he slammed it to the stones, frothy wine spilling like blood. Men followed his roar with cheers until their voices blurred into one thunderous chorus. Robert lived for the next charge, the next roar, the next horn of ale. Ned lived for the next dawn. Between those dawns he measured the realm's heartbeat, pulse by faltering pulse. Benjen's raven had arrived at first light, the dead walk beneath the wall. The commanders muster every man. The snow bleeds blue fire. No more than that, yet enough to crack Ned's composure. He had read the words thrice, then burnt the parchment in the brazier, to let no careless eyes share in terror. But the flames did not devour the dread. He felt it still, standing knee-deep in mire while Robert planned his next assault upon the loyalist hosts hemming them. Night's Watch business was not his. Oaths severed him from that duty when he chose crown over cloak. But Benjen was blood, and blood called. "Stark!" Robert's voice cut through the murmur of his men. "They say the bastard of Duskendale marches south with 1,000 sellswords, all iron for the dragon. What say you we ride out and crush his spirit before his steel cools?" Before Ned replied, a hush swept the yard, for the rain had ceased. In that breathless quiet, a distant horn wailed, a sound warped by miles, but carried upon a wind that smelled of pine and far north snows. The men froze as the note dwindled, leaving only hammering hearts in the silence. Ned knew that call, though he'd never heard it in person, the Watch's oldest warning. Sable wings in the dark. The horn of winter? No, old Nan's ramblings. Yet the wind shifted, and Ned tasted frost on his tongue. Robert must have seen the change upon his friend's face. The big man strode close, eyes dark beneath rain-slick curls. "What troubles you, Ned? You look as though a grave walker kissed your mother." Ned struggled to breathe. "A message from the wall. Benjen says, the dead stir." Robert's laugh faltered, then failed.
"Ghost tales."
"Perhaps, but the horn we just heard, a trick of the squall. Focus on princes and crowns, Ned. Ghosts won't slit our throats this day." Ned wanted to believe, yet the air felt wrong, too sharp, too still. Crows perched along the rooftops, silent as statues, black eyes glimmering. Not ghosts, Ned thought. Something worse. Between earth and sky, in the high passes of the Frostfangs, an army older than Empire took its first breath in 8,000 years. Snow streamed in veils across a host that stood silent as statues, rank upon rank of figures tall and slender, wrapped in pelts of moonlit white. Blades of pale crystal rested at their sides, sighing with a music born of midwinter's heart. At their center sat a thing of throne and ice, vacant still, but pulsing with a cold life that waited. The Night King approached upon wind that obeyed his stride. He wore no crown, yet frost wreathed him like a diadem, and within his chest the shard of the vortex beat a drumless cadence. Eyes carved from the coldest star in the blackest night surveyed the horizon, and in that gaze a promise stirred. Break the wall, unmake the dawn. Before him knelt his generals, their visages carved from winter's bones. With a voice like snow sliding from a brittle branch, the Night King spoke, and frost-bitten ravens rose from the trees, cawing his decree to the empty sky. 1,000 leagues south, children cried out in their sleep, their small bodies shaken by dreams of endless white. Midwives whispered prayers to nameless gods. Hearth fires guttered and went out. None knew why the world shuddered. But men who feared nothing suddenly eyed the north and felt the prickling of ghosts upon their skin. At Eastwatch, Benjen Stark stood atop the wall once more as the first rays of dawn painted the sea in sheets of dusky rose. Yet the light felt thin, distant, as though filtered through layers of crystal. Ice clung to his lashes, and his breath came in plumes. Only one other soul shared the platform with him. Maester Harmune, swaddled in furs over his gray robes, ravens circling above in nervous spirals. "You felt it too," Benjen said. The maester's eyes, ringed with sleepless red, spoke the answer. "Something crossed the sea," Harmune whispered. "Or not crossed, rose from it, perhaps. The old tales speak of blue fires under the water, of ice birthed in the depths. No ship could weather that storm. No living ship." Benjen watched the horizon where he'd glimpsed phantom lights hours before. Nothing remained but a mirror-smooth expanse. Yet the stillness chilled him more deeply than the wind had. The sea should move, howl, foam. Instead it waited, as though held in the palm of an unseen hand. "We must send riders to Castle Black," he said, "and messages south. Dragons and rebels?" Harmune smiled without warmth. "Let the king war with his own kind. Ours stands ready." "Ready?" Benjen gestured toward the silent courtyard below. "We're 500 strong. If the legends are true. If they are true, then a king's armies will fare no better." Benjen bowed his head. 500. Yet his breath clouded and his pulse quickened. For 500 years the watch had rotted from within, its might dulled by neglect. Now winter demanded its due, and they would pay in blood. Another gust rose, rattling the maester's chain of office. "Listen," Harmune murmured. Benjen strained his ears and heard music, a crystalline keening, as though some vast choir of icicles sang from beyond the edge of the world. The sound set his teeth on edge, filled his eyes with tears that froze. On the water, mist coiled upward in tendrils, swirling into shapes that almost resembled men. The maester's breath hitched. "They sing," he said, "the song without heat." Benjen drew his sword, though the mist lay miles distant. "Sound the horns," he whispered. "Twice for rangers returning. Thrice." His throat closed around the words. "Thrice for the White Walkers." Harmune did not argue. He turned and fled toward the stairs, voice raised to rouse the garrison. Benjen remained, sword in hand, watching as the mist thickened, breaching the world in silence. His heart thundered. Somewhere within that pall of moon-white fog came figures, impossibly tall, unspeakably graceful, walking upon the surface of the sea as though upon glass. Blue eyes burned, distant pinpricks that fixed upon the wall. Benjen Stark, third son of Lord Ricard, heir to no kingdom but bound by honor to defend the realm of men, swallowed the lump in his throat. He lowered his blade until its steel kissed the ice-rimmed parapet, and he whispered a prayer to old gods carved in wood and stone, gods that might yet hear his call. The horn sounded, once, twice, then, after a long and terrible pause, thrice, echoing down the length of the wall, reverberating through the lonely watchtowers and the deep black forests and the snows that never melted. Ravens took flight in great clouds, their wings beating frantic thunder. Men spilled from barracks, half-armored, wide-eyed. Fires were lit, arrows knocked, oil boiled. Above it all, the wall shuddered, not in fear, but as a living thing awakening from millennial slumber. Cracks spiderwebbed through sheets of hoarfrost. Distant spires of ice groaned like collapsing temples. The silent guard of frozen stone, carved by wind and time, seemed to bow their heads. For a foe as old as the memory of man had come, and the wall itself remembered. But elsewhere the world remained ignorant still. In the Vale's misty heights, young Lynn Corbray polished Lady Forlorn, dreaming of glory at the coming tourney in Gulltown. In the Reach, corseted maidens wove garlands of apple blossoms for some petty lordling's wedding. Across the narrow sea, Illyrio Mopatis sipped sweet wine and weighed the price of princes. And at Storm's End, where gales beat stone into lichen-carved faces, Stannis Baratheon labored with quills and accounts, forever the king's unappreciated brother. All this life hummed on, blind to the shadow stretching south. Yet north of the wall, in the dark between pines, another life stirred. Men wrapped in pelts, pale of eye, frost-rimmed of beard. The free folk had no king now. Mance Rayder's name belonged to seasons yet unborn, but they felt the earth groan beneath alien footsteps. Fires dwindled. Chieftains spoke of moving south en masse, to safety or to slaughter, whichever fate offered first. The Hornfoots heard wolves howl beneath black skies and spoke of dire omens. The giants carried blue fire in their fists, and the Thens, proud cannibal kings of the far valleys, found their dead walking in the dawn. One by one, the tribes turned their steps toward the wall, not to fight but to flee, for even wildlings knew a predator when they felt its eyes. At Castle Black, Lord Commander Corgyle, skin cracked like bark, listened to Raven's cry and felt his age in every bone. Messages from Eastwatch lay strewn across his desk, ink still damp. Dead things on the water, mist takes shape. The wall sings. He had not slept, nor had the maesters, nor had the men on the parapets, their torches quivering. He rose and threw his fur mantle over stooped shoulders. "Summon every ranger," he ordered the guard. "Gather the stewards. Fletch every arrow." The guard paled. "Every arrow, my lord?" "Every god's damned arrow in the world, if need be." He stepped into the yard, boots crunching old snow. Shapes moved through the gloom. Boys dragging crates, veterans sharpening axes, ravens flapping. The smell of pitch filled the air. Atop the wall, horns bellowed again. 3 times from Eastwatch, 2 from Shadow Tower, once from some wind-blown outpost he'd thought abandoned. A chorus of warnings, a dirge for the living. "My lord!" Maester Ulmer hurried after him, scroll in hand. "The Raven from Winterfell, Lord Stark rides south with 2,000 spears. He offers aid." Corgyle grunted. "May the old gods speed him, but winter rides faster." He climbed the stairs toward the top of the wall. Age bowed him, yet purpose stiffened his spine. "If this be our last dawn, let me taste the wind from home." He stepped onto the platform, and the world spread before him in spectral hues. Pink dawn bleeding into silver ice, shadows long as rivers cast by spires of broken cloud. And there, far to the east, hovering above the narrow band where sea met sky, he spied a line of shapes moving. An army upon the water, marching south. No sails, no oars, no sound, save for the faintest whisper of ice upon ice. The Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, 54 years a brother, gripped the railing so hard the wood cracked. Tears stung his eyes and froze to his lashes. "So it is true," he breathed. "The dark harvest, that same dawn, in the red keep's highest tower, King Aerys II Targaryen laughed at invisible treasons dancing in candle flame. His brittle fingernails scratched scabbed lines upon his cheeks as he muttered burn, burn, burn to ghosts only he could see. When Grand Maester Pycelle begged him to rest, the king threw fat at the old man. Clots of grease flung from the feast he would not eat. Yet between mortal ravings a single word pierced the room, shrill as tempered steel. Ice. Pycelle froze. Your Grace. Hush, Aerys whispered, cocking his ragged head toward the shuttered window. Do you hear it? Do you hear the walls singing? The maester heard only the rush of wind. But the king's eyes blazed with terror beyond reason, and suddenly Pycelle felt a chill stroke his spine. Burn them all, those eyes said. Burn the ice too. Neither king nor maester knew that thousands of leagues away, beneath the heart of the wall, ancient sorcery flickered like a guttering lamp. Runnels of magic, long dormant, flared in runes carved by children of forest and men of the dawn. Green fire raced through ice veins. Sigils twisted, seeking to awaken guardians carved from living obsidian. Yet power waned. The lines had faded across centuries of neglect. Where once a bulwark mighty enough to turn the hammer of winter thrummed, now the pulse faltered, skipping beats. The wall shivered, cracks widened. In a cavern sprayed with crystals of frost, a small figure watched as blue light bled into the ice. Leaf, last of the singers south of the Frostfangs, placed her hand upon the rune and whispered words older than empire. Vines of emerald glow answered, winding through the cracks, knitting, holding, for now. But even she felt the tremor of a will vast and merciless pressing against her threshold. It wrapped itself around the wall like roots around a grave, testing for weakness. She felt its triumph when it found one, and she felt its promise, we come. Leaf withdrew her hand. T. Oh, soon, she murmured. The song is not yet sung. Yet the wind had already shifted, carrying the first notes of winter. At White Harbor, Lord Wyman Manderly stood upon his ramparts, dressed not in silks but in mail. The harbor churned with ships preparing for war. Tradesmen's cogs converted to troop carriers, deckhands sealing hatches against spray. He watched gulls wheel above the masts and remembered old sailors' tales of storms that walked. His youngest son had laughed at such fancies. But that morning's tide delivered a corpse frozen upright in a block of ice, its eyes shining a dull blue until the sun touched them, and then they burst like bubbles. No wound marred its flesh, yet its hands were clawed as if trying to escape the chill that birthed it. Wyman ordered the corpse burned, but flames left the flesh oily and black, refusing to catch until they poured lamp oil over it. Even then, it took an hour to die. He dispatched ravens to every holdfast, bar the gates, gather seed and salt. Winter storms carry more than snow, and he prayed to gods he'd neglected since boyhood, praying hardest for his men already marching south under Lord Ricard's banner, oblivious to the tides swelling behind them. By the second day, mist had claimed sight of land along the wall's eastern edge. Rangers sent to scout did not return. At night, blue fires flickered beneath the ice, miles long, like veins pumping icy blood. The roar of unseen oceans blended with the rattling moans of things that were not winds. Men began to whisper that the wall no longer stood tall and proud but hunched, as though shrinking from a blow it knew was coming. Benjen Stark patrolled the parapets till his boots bled. He listened to the ice, its crackling shifts, its low groans, its sighs, and felt like a priest reading omens in entrails. Every sound bespoke strain. He prayed for Eddard to arrive. He prayed for Rhaegar or Robert or some miracle of dragons and wildfire. But no banners crested the horizon, only cloud and snow. He passed Maester Harmune at dawn of the third day, hunched over his raven's coat. The birds screeched and pecked at the maester's hands, refusing grain. Their eyes were yellow pebbles of panic. They will not fly, Harmune said, voice cracked. Will not. Benjen frowned. Cannot. It is as though the sky has thickened. They sense something out there. They fear to cross it. Benjen reached into a cage and tried to coax a raven forth. The creature shrank from his hand, feathers bristling. When he pressed harder, it bit until blood welled. He pulled back. "If messages cannot fly," Benjen murmured, "the realm will not heed us. It heeds nothing north of the neck." Harmune spat, anger born of despair. "Let them burn in their castles. We are the Watch. We stand alone." But the Watch did not stand unmarked by Southron eyes. At Storm's End, Stannis Baratheon paused over a cramped letter penned by a steward of Shadow Tower. "Strange lights, horns thrice, our brothers vanish." His squire asked if it concerned more dragon loyalists. Stannis only grunted, eyes narrowed. He carried the missive to Robert, who dismissed it with a shrug. Yet that night, Stannis found the Maester's map room and traced the wall's outline with a calloused finger, feeling the waxy vellum crinkle beneath his touch like thin ice. He thought of Shireen, tucked in bed somewhere in the drafty keep, of storms that never ceased, of duty. And for the first time since skirting the God's Eye in their flight south, he wondered if the war they fought was not the war that mattered. In his solitude, Stannis burned a candle and drafted his own letter, one that would find its way to Winterfell by cautious hands. "Ride north. The realm may need you sooner than you know." But ravens feared the skies, and couriers rode roads now choked by storms and raiders. The letter would travel slowly, perhaps too slowly. On the evening of the fourth day, the wall sang. It began as trembling. A faint vibration passed from ice to stone to trembling boots. Men paused mid-stride, hearing nothing but feeling everything. Tankards rattled on trestles. Oil in lanterns sloshed. Somewhere a hound howled and fled its leash. Then the vibration rose into sound, low, resonant, like a horn fashioned from the spine of some long-dead god. It blossomed into chords, each deeper than thought, older than bone. The wall pulsed with it, light flashing within its crystalline depths. Men fell to their knees. Some prayed, some wept. Benjen Stark clutched the parapet as the ice beneath him thrummed. He met Maester Harmune's gaze across the platform. Neither spoke. Words drowned beneath that colossal music. The song rose, inexorable. And then, across the sea ice mists, a chorus answered, sharp, piercing, shredding the air. The screams of the other's blades caressing each other, forging resonance. The two songs met upon the wind, clashed, merged. In that moment, the wall cracked. A fissure sprang from Eastwatch's base, racing upward like lightning seeking the sky. It reached 300 feet before halting, leaving a jagged wound from which shards of ice fell in sheets. The wall did not break, not yet, but the crack remained, pulsing with pale blue. Silence followed, but not peace. A new hush settled, deeper than before, as though the world held its breath. Then the mists parted, and shapes marched forth onto the shore. They came as an army of statues, each footfall silent despite their numbers. Tall, gaunt, eyes burning blue. Ahead of them drifted a chill so fierce that waves froze mid-crash, falling to splinter on the rocks. Pale spiders scuttled among their ranks, webbing frost across any surface. And behind them lumbered things once men, now wights, jaws agape in eternal silent screams, skin stretched tight over bones glazed with horror. At the fore strode the Night King. He lifted an arm, and the sea between him and the wall iced over in seconds, white creeping across black water until a causeway of frozen intent connected the two realms. The Night King lowered his hand, and the army moved. Ravens burst from Castle Black in a storm of feathers, wings beating frantic against invisible force. A few climbed skyward. Most crashed against the wall and fluttered to the courtyard. But one, sleek and coal-black, soared above the frost-crusted ramparts, dodged spears of wind, and vanished south. It carried a single desperate message. They have come. Whether any would read it in time, neither raven nor man could say. On the fifth day, as twilight bled lavender across the canopy of the gods' wood at Riverrun, Catelyn Stark felt a prickle along her spine. She pressed a hand to her belly, heavy with child, and closed her eyes. Somewhere a dire wolf howled. The sound did not fade with distance but grew, echoing within her chest until her heart beat to its rhythm. "My lady!" Septa Mordane's voice brought her back. Caitlin opened her eyes. Candlelight flickered upon the heart tree's pale face, sap tears glistening scarlet. The gods would smelled of damp earth and burning leaves, for autumn crept even here. Yet among those scents she caught a faint note of frost. Winter has found me, she thought, but Riverrun lay warm within the riverlands. Winter should not come so soon. She turned to leave, but the heart tree's eyes held her, and in that red-sapped gaze she saw blue flames dancing on a wall of ice and armies of corpses marching. Her unborn child kicked, and she gasped. Lady Stark fled the God's Wood in silence, carrying dread with her into the keep's candlelit halls. She would speak of it to no one, but that night she dreamt of snow. Snow piled higher than towers, snow cracking beneath the weight of death. The living realms stirred, though slowly. At King's Landing, ravens hammered at the rookery doors, frantic. Qyburn and Pycelle both sought audiences. Littlefinger heard rumors of horns along the wall and whispered them in ears that mattered. Varys smiled his soft smile and said nothing, for his little birds chirped of blue fires that melted steel. Word seeped into Septa tabernacles and flea-bottom wine sinks. The small folk grew restless. Some prayed to the Seven for deliverance. Others packed what little they owned and looked south, believing Dornish sands safer than northern snows. But politics moved like treacle. The king's madness consumed every council meeting. Rhaegar was far on campaign. Lords quarreled over coins and titles. And winter marched. At Eastwatch, 5,000 wights battered the base of the wall, clawing at ice with broken nails. Above them, rangers loosed arrow after arrow, each tip obsidian barbed. Some found their mark in the hearts of others, and those fell in bursts of shattered frost. But for every white-shadowed lord of winter lain low, 10 more emerged from the mists behind. Oil rained down, blackening the snow. Fires roared, turning whites to ash. Yet the pitiless wind howled all embers cold, and through the smoke strode the Night King, untouched. He raised one hand to the crack running skyward, and frost blossomed along its edges. The wall groaned, buckling inward. A slab the size of a castle gate sheared off, thundered to the ground, and exploded in a storm of ice shards. An opening appeared, no larger than a barn door, but enough. Whites surged forward. Rangers met them in a melee of iron, obsidian, and tears. Benjen Stark stood in the gap, blade whirling, cutting down corpses too slow to dodge obsidian. Yet more came. An axe took his pauldron, cracking bone. He stumbled. A pale hand seized his wrist, nails burrowing into flesh. A shaft of dragonglass pierced the white skull, shattering it. Harmune, face streaked with soot, yanked the maul free. Fall back. He screamed. Benjen spat blood and ignored him. If they surrendered the breach, the wall's doom came faster. He drove his sword through another corpse, severing its spine, and kicked the remains away. Beside him, men of the watch formed a bulwark of shields and pikes, frost crusting their beards. They fought for every inch. But the Night King moved closer, and with every step, the opening widened. Hundreds of leagues south, Eddard Stark urged his horse to a gallop across the King's Road, gray wind racing in long strides beside him. Word had reached him at Moat Cailin. Eastwatch breached, not from Raven, but from free folk refugees stumbling south, faces scorched with frostbite, eyes hollow. He rode without sleep. At his back thundered the northern host, banners flaring, the dire wolf of Stark, the bear of Mormont, the moose of Hornwood, the flayed man of Bolton, uneasy allies bound by the common specter of death. They left their war with dragons and stags unfinished. Robert's rebellion be damned, for if the wall fell, no throne would matter. Yet between Stark and the wall lay leagues of snow and not enough time. As the 6th day dawned, the crack reached the wall's summit, splitting towers in twain. The Night King raised both arms. A hush swept the world. The wall shattered. It fell not in one cataclysmic crash, but in a cascade of monstrous shards, each as large as a mountain's tooth, tumbling into the bay in plumes of steam. Ice smoke choked the sky. The ground quaked. Men fled, screaming, as towers collapsed. Eastwatch crumbled beneath the weight, falling into itself, burying defenders within roaring avalanches. The sea surged, white-capped waves tossing wreckage like toys. Through the ruins strode the Night King, his shadow long upon broken ice. He stepped onto hard land and knelt, pressing a palm to the earth. Frost crackled outward, forming a path south. Behind him, the army of the dead flooded through the breach. The first towns fell without warning, little fishing hamlets never meant for war. Corpses shambled through streets. Blue-eyed riders mounted dead horses, lances lowered. The living scattered. Some rode south on half-wild mares, screaming of shadows. Others fought and died and rose to join the march. By the time riders reached Winterfell with tales of doom, snow already dusted the outer bailey. Maester Luwin climbed the broken tower to watch the northern sky and saw it shimmer with ghostly blue. He penned a raven to King's Landing, though he doubted it would fly. Inside the great hall, Lady Lyanna Stark, aged and frail, summoned every banner in the north. But men were already gone, marching with Eddard south. Winterfell's garrison stood less than 500. "And if the dead come before my son returns?" she asked Luwin. "Then Winterfell will keep faith," he replied, though fear gnawed his heart. Southward the undead tide flowed, across woods, hills, lacustrine plains, leaving behind a wake of silence. Trees shed leaves at their passing. Rivers froze beneath them, ice thickening in minutes. Clouds gathered overhead, pregnant with storms. At Castle Black's ruins, Jeor Mormont rallied survivors, forging them into a rearguard that shadowed the horde, harrying its flanks with flame-tipped arrows and guerrilla strikes. They freed captive wildlings, armed them, bled together in night raids. But numbers proved a blunt truth. Against countless dead, valor bled out like warmth in winter. "Mance Rayder," Mormont muttered, tending a wounded free folk spear wife. "If ever the wildlings needed a king," the spear wife spat. "King's words won't stop that." "No," Mormont agreed, binding her arm. "But kings have crowns, and crowns turn men's eyes. We need eyes north now." The realm heard at last. At Harrenhal, Roose Bolton weighed a letter sealed in ice-blue wax. "The Dead March," it claimed. Lord Bolton smiled thinly, but he posted riders north. At Dragonstone, Rhaegar paused on a battlefield map. Reports from scouts placed the Night King near the last river. "We ride north," he told his lords. Jon Cunnington protested. "We lose the rebellion. We lose the world if we tarry." Dragons, though scarce, could still cross leagues in hours, but Rhaegar had no dragons, only men and steel. Robert Baratheon heard in the thick of siegecraft outside King's Landing, where his hammer battered gates and his laugh bellowed louder than catapults. A squire delivered news. The wall shattered, undead hosts marching. Robert's laughter died. He glanced at Ned, arrived breathless, armor rimmed in frost, and for the first time in memory, fear dimmed the storm in his eyes. "How long till they reach us?" he asked. Ned answered, voice hoarse. "If they break Winterfell, moons. If dragons do not come, weeks." Robert looked to the city walls, the Red Keep, the Targaryen banners. He spat, "Damn the crown." Then to his banners, "We march north." Stormlord and Wolf clasped hands, rebellion postponed, just as horns blew on King's Landing's walls. Rhaegar's host approached beneath peace banners, dragons absent but intent clear. The prince himself rode forth under a white flag. Robert met him halfway, thunder growling in the distance. Words passed that historians would debate for centuries, but one truth stood. Stags, wolves, and dragons forged an armistice that day, not for thrones but for dawn itself. 3 armies turned north, but winter cared nothing for truces. As the Night King's legion rolled toward Winterfell, skies darkened to perpetual twilight. Snow fell sideways on gales strong enough to flay flesh. The dread sound of ice on steel filled the world. The gnawing, scraping, unsettling hiss of death made tangible. Thousands of northerners manned Winterfell's walls, torches blazing, cauldrons steaming with pitch. Direwolves howled. Children cried. Old men fingered rusted swords they'd hoped never to lift again. Above it all, Luwin lit beacon fires visible for leagues, a line of orange teeth gnashing at the night. Eddard Stark reached his home on the eve of battle, riding through the gates as horns signaled enemies near. He embraced his mother, clasped his maester's hand, greeted every soldier by name, though he had no time for any. He ascended the battlements, looked north, and saw the world swallowed by shadow. A river of white advanced, lit from within by sapphire stars. Fires flickered in the distance. Screams drifted on the wind. Outposts fell one by one, their flames extinguished. Benjen Stark staggered into Winterfell's yard hours before dawn. Half frozen, one eye clouded with ice. He told of Eastwatch's last stand, of Harmune dragged screaming into blue fire, of the wall's fall. He pressed something into Ned's hands, a shard of glassy crystal shaped like a dagger, its surface shimmering with inner night. "Dragonglass breaks them," he rasped. "But not him, not the king." Ned stared at the blade, felt its chill bite through gloves. "Then we must break him another way." "How, brother?" Benjen coughed blood. "He is winter. Even winter has an end." On the 9th day, Winterfell's bells rang. The army of the dead encircled the castle beneath a pall of swirling snow. Wights clawed at the walls, piled upon each other, forming living ramps. Others strode behind, raising spears of frost. Beyond them, giants dressed in rime hammered the gate with frozen trunks. And at their heart the Night King watched. Eddard Stark donned armor black as moonless nights, direwolf etched in silver across the breast. He stood upon the battlements with bow in hand, arrows tipped in dragonglass. Benjen at his side. They loosed together. Arrows streaked black across the snowstorm, bursting whites in flares of frost. Men along the wall cheered, until giants roared and gates groaned. Distant thunder answered, the tramp of hooves, the clash of banners. From the south came Baratheon war horns, their note deep as drums. Behind them, griffins of House Cunnington flew beside dragons three-headed crimson, and among them rode a prince in black plate chased with rubies. From the east came the Arryns, falcon banners glimmering in early morning glow, Marcus Arryn's knights in silvered scale. The Vale opened for them, roads lined with folk bearing torches against the storm. Three hosts converged upon Winterfell, like streams feeding a single river. Robert's fury, Rhaegar's resolve, and the stoic valor of every house that answered. They broke upon the undead flank with fire and steel. War cries tangled with the howl of winter. Drums thundered, and for one breath the dead faltered. But falter was not fall. Others turned toward the new threat, blades raised. Blue frost radiated, freezing steel to brittle shrapnel. Men shattered like glass. Horses screamed, fell, rose again with blue eyes. Yet living champions pressed on. Arthur Dayne's dawn carving arcs of smoking ice. Robert's hammer caving skulls. Lyanna Mormont, small as a child but fierce, leading a spear thrust into undead ranks. Theon Greyjoy's axes dripping black ichor. Brynden Tully's arrow finding the heart of a White Walker, bursting it into shards that hissed across the snow. Rhaegar saw the Night King through the swirling maelstrom. He spurred his horse, determined to end prophecy with steel. But cold wraith riders closed around him. Dawn and dusk danced in his fists as Dayne carved a path to protect his prince. Banners burned, torches snuffed. The world shrank to flashes of steel and snow swirling like ashes. Within Winterfell, Benjen Stark led a sortie through the postern gate, dragging barrels of wildfire salvaged from a maester's storeroom, relics of Mad King paranoia shipped north decades prior for unknown reasons. They rolled them beneath the feet of giants, hurled torches, and green fire erupted. Snow turned emerald. Whites shrieked as limbs melted. But the Night King raised both hands, and the flames guttered, turning black, snuffed by void. Silence fell where wildfire died. Benjen stared in horror as the burnt hulks shivered, corpses stirring anew, flame-scorched flesh knitting across their bones. They rose, eyes blazing blue yet flecked with sickly green, mockery of life. Above the gods' wood, ravens circled in frenzied loops. The heart tree quaked, bark cracking. Roots writhed beneath snow, pulling up soil soaked in blood. Leaf emerged from a secret stair, arms raised, chanting in a tongue older than men. Green light pooled around her. She summoned the last of children's magic, called upon stone and secret names. But power ebbed, words faltering. Too few singers remained to hold back the storm. Night deepened though dawn should have broken. Clouds closed around a moon sickle-thin. Men fought blind, guided by screams and sparks. Somewhere Robert fell, kneecap shattered by frost, yet rose again. Somewhere Arthur Dane lost dawn beneath a tide of claws and perished with a cry lost to wind. Somewhere Rhaegar, stripped of guards, faced the Night King upon snow churned red and black. The prince swung bright steel. The Night King answered with a sword of living ice. The clash echoed like thunder. Rhaegar thrust, parried, spun, music in motion. But the Night King learned each note before it sounded. He knocked aside the blade and seized the prince's throat. Frost spread, turning flesh white. Rhaegar gasped, breath freezing midair. A hammer roared. Robert, bleeding, driven by rage, swung with all that remained. The Night King turned, raising an arm of ice. Stonehammer met crystal limb. Sparks of blue fire burst outward. The limb cracked, but did not break. The Night King released Rhaegar, backhanded Robert, sending him sprawling. He raised his sword to finish the king who never was. An arrow slammed into the Night King's side, lodging between ribs of ice. Obsidian arrowhead. The Night King staggered, gaze swiveling to the battlements, where Eddard Stark stood, bow still quivering. A second arrow already knocked. Time slowed. The Night King lifted his sword.
Ned exhaled, lyst.
But the Night King shattered the arrow with a flick of frost, fragments exploding into sparkling dust. He pointed at Ned. Blue fire coursed along his blade. The wall's remnant crack flared. Every wight within earshot turned toward Winterfell's walls. The castle shook as thousands hurled themselves at the stone. Outer walls began to crumble. Soldiers raced to plug breaches. Inside the gods' wood, the heart tree's face wept sap so dark it looked like ink. The end pressed close, and yet, across the darkened sky came a sound none had heard in centuries. The shriek of dragons. From the east, like meteors, three shapes blistered through cloud. Wreathed in shadow, wings beating thunder. They were smaller than legend spoke, barely the length of a longship, but fire streamed from their jaws. Gold, bronze, and green. On their backs rode men of Valyria's blood, the last secret of House Targaryen, eggs hatched in exile, raised in hiding. Rhaegar, shivering on his knees, looked up, tears freezing on his lashes. "Viserys," he whispered. The Night King turned as dragonfire poured upon him. Flames, born of a world before winter, engulfed the ice. The ground shook. Whites flamed like dry kindling. The Night King staggered, cloak ablaze with green-gold tongues. Ice dripped from him, reforming, melting, roiling. Eddard watched, breath held. Fire alone might not suffice. He remembered Benjen's shard weighting his belt. "Cover me," he told the archers. Then he ran. He leapt from battlements to shed roof, sprinted along slick tiles, jumped to ground outside the collapsing gate. Snow crunched, arrows whistled past him, burying in whites that lunged. He hacked, stabbed, forced a path to the crater of dragonfire where the Night King knelt. A thing of steam and molten rime, still rising. Ned drew the dragonglass dagger. Frost hissed against its edge. He threw. The blade spun end over end, carving a line of black through flame, and buried itself in the Night King's chest, right where Robert's hammer cracked the armor of ice. For one heartbeat, nothing changed. Then a fissure spread. Blue fire dimmed. The Night King raised a hand, as though to pluck the shard free. But his fingers crumbled, drifting away on the wind. Cracks latticed his chest, his face, his crown of frost. He looked to Ned, eyes fathomless, and in them Ned saw dawn breaking upon a world cleansed of man. Then those eyes shattered. The Night King exploded into a storm of snow and crystal dust. A thunderclap rippled through the field. Wights froze mid-lunge, then collapsed, lifeless. The wind screamed across the shivering sea, gathering shards of moonlit ice from the floes and hurling them against the black stones of Eastwatch by the sea. It was a wind pulled from the lungs of winter itself, sharp, pitiless, and unending. Yet it carried something colder still upon its breath tonight, something that even the oldest rangers could not name without letting their voices tremble. Some swore they heard faint chimes of glass within that gale, as though the very air were cracking apart to let death pass through. Derek Pike, who had come to Eastwatch after 3 turns of the seasons in the mines beneath the fingers, pressed his fist against the rampart and winced as splinters of rime bit into his knuckles. Beside him, old Maester Ronald held a tarnished spyglass to one cloud-white eye, his thin hair flapping like tattered banners in the storm. Down below, the portcullis rattled in its groove, iron teeth shuddering against the pressure of a wind too strong for its chains. Beyond the narrow strait lay the frozen horizon, black sea, blacker sky, and the faint suggestion of a shape moving where water should be. Derek leaned forward, squinting until his eyes watered. He told himself it was a rogue berg set adrift from the northern floes, but the shape kept shifting, rising in imperceptible increments, like a great obsidian fin breaching the surface. A raven burst from the rookery tower in a whirl of ink-dark wings, banking hard into the gale. It clawed for height, fought a moment, then vanished into the night. 3 beats later the tower bell tolled, 1, twice, thrice, an alarm reserved for fire upon the sea or ships with broken keels. Derek had never heard it rung. The sound turned his marrow to slush. "Stand fast," Maester Ronald rasped, lowering the spyglass. "Send for the first ranger. Best wake every man you can." Derek hesitated. "What is it, Maester?" "A question for the gods," the old man muttered, "and none of them here to answer." The yard below erupted into motion. Lanterns flared, banners of fire billowing back in the wind, and men spilled from barracks half-armored, fastening belts and buckles with clumsy frost-numb fingers. A dozen ravens took wing in frantic pulses, one for Castle Black, one for the Shadow Tower, others for Winterfell and Queen's Crown and Stone Door. Black sparks tossed upon the gale. It was closer now. The shape had resolved into a wall of mist that advanced upon the castle like the crest of a silent wave. Frozen spray glittered within that vapor veil, catching the rising moonlight in cruel prisms. Derek felt it colder even before the wind shifted. Though Eastwatch already sat beneath a mantle of permafrost, this cold was different, hungry, absolute, the kind that stole the taste from your tongue and the warmth from your blood in equal measure. Torches extinguished as the wall of mist lapped at the outer rampart. Men cursed, fumbling with flints. Sparks flared and died on black stones rimed with fresh ice. Somewhere below, a horse screamed, high, shrill, and desperate, then fell abruptly silent. The castle's eastern watchtower groaned as its timbers contracted, frost forming crystalline ribs along every beam and buttress. First Ranger Kalmar Flint sprinted up the stair, axe in hand, helm under one arm. He was thick-set and broad of shoulder, with a beard like a gray bear's pelt. Snow dusted his brow where sweat froze upon contact with the air. "Report," he barked. Maester Ronald's lips quivered with more than cold. "Mist on the water, but not mist." He thrust the spyglass into Flint's hands. "See for yourself." Flint braced against the battlement, scanning. For a moment he said nothing, but Derek saw the big man's breath hitch, saw his knuckles whiten upon the brass tube. "7 save us," the first ranger whispered. Derek dared a step closer. In the brief lens of Flint's spyglass, he glimpsed shapes walking within the mist, tall, slender, too long in the limb. Their eyes were shards of pallid flame. They moved with a glide that mocked every mortal gait. Where they passed, the sea itself solidified, turning from black waves to still, argent glass. Behind them followed ranks of figures so hunched with frozen mail and ragged pelts they scarcely looked human. Their footfalls rang as brittle as shattered glass upon the newborn ice. The Night's Watch had named them children's tales, White shadows, others, walkers. Names seemed small as dream fragments when set beside the thing itself. Flint slammed the spyglass shut and turned. Archers to the ramparts. Oil in the cauldrons, burn it hot. I want every jar of wildfire we took off that smuggler's brig fetched up here before the hour is out. We hold this gate. What of Castle Black? Maester Ronald croaked. Ravens are away, Flint answered. If the gods are good, Lord Commander Corgyle will send riders. But we prepare as if no help will come. We hold. That wall of ice is thin as cracked lake water. If they try to cross, we'll break it beneath burning pitch. If they summon worse. He swallowed. We pray. Far to the west, above the vast spine of the wall where it curved like a frozen serpent across the narrow hills, Benjen Stark stood watch atop the King's Tower at Castle Black. The raven perched upon his wrist was a soot-feathered creature with one white wing and one black, its eyes cut from midnight. It had arrived wind-lashed and half-dead, bearing two words looped in a maester's crabbed hand, Eastwatch Shadows. That alone would have rattled Benjen, but the bird arrived half-frozen, its feet encased in a sheath of unexplained hoarfrost that cracked away under the rookery's heat. Benjen hurried the note to Lord Commander Corgyle. The old knight rose from his chair with a curse that could peel bark from a weirwood, calling for the horn that must never be blown. 3 blasts. The wall had not heard such a call in 8,000 years. The first horn blast quaked loose snow from every crenellation. The second rattled the barracks shutters and sent marmots bolting across the yard. The third seemed to tear the night in two. Benjen felt it in his bones more than his ears, the sound of an age dying. Riders scrambled. Corgyle ordered every spare horse readied, every man who could hold a spear mounted, and every maester to their ravens. Benjen volunteered to lead the relief column east. They were to gallop the wall's southern road to Queenscrown, then cut north along the Milkwater and make for Eastwatch's landward gate. Others argued for caution, but Stark blood ran hot as black iron in a forge. Benjen would not leave his brothers to freeze in the dark while he waited on the lash of seniority. The road was treacherous. The southern face of the wall dripped meltwater in the day. At night it refroze in rippled plates of glass. Horses slipped, iron-shod hooves screaming on the ice. Benjen tasted blood in the back of his throat every time a mount floundered, fearing a snapped leg, but Ghost, his gray gelding, kept steady. By dawn's dim embers they had reached the turn north. A shadow of smoke billowed on the horizon where Eastwatch lay, and though the winter sky was blank as slate, Benjen saw pulses of green fire flicker within that plume. Wildfire. He spurred Ghost into a desperate gallop. Upon Eastwatch's outer wall, Derek Pike crouched behind a crenel and hugged a spear to his chest so tight the wood groaned. The cauldrons had been lit. Green flame licked the iron rims, casting sable faces in witchlight. Archers loosed shafts soaked in tar. The first volley hissed bright through the mist, but the wind stole much of their fire, snatching tongues of flame mid-flight. The arrows clattered harmlessly across the frozen tide, skittering away like broken reeds. Then the walkers advanced. There were 5 of them at first, fanning out across the frost-shattered shallows. The sea rippled beneath their feet as though displeased by their trespass, yet could not muster the will to break. Each carried a blade of ice so clear it appeared almost liquid, rippling with captured starlight. Derek watched one lift its sword. Frost blossomed in a circle at its feet, spider webbing outward until it struck an anchor chain moored below and turned the iron brittle as chalk. Links snapped in a sigh. The chain fell into the surf, shattering like glass. Behind those pale kings came the dead, corpses of wildlings and free folk, fishermen and raiders, men and women alike, some so ancient their flesh hung in tar-black strips. They marched through knee-deep surf without complaint, eyes glowing a milky, baleful blue. Longboats abandoned on the strand were torn apart for makeshift ladders. The watchman's oil-slick flares cut down a dozen, yet where one rag-wrapped cadaver fell, another took its place, climbing over bone and drowned flesh alike. Derek thrust his spear point downward at a pair of clawing dead. The first crumpled as ash where the dragonglass blade pierced its skull. The second seized the shaft with strength impossible for lifeless sinew and jerked him forward so violently he nearly flipped headfirst over the battlement. Steel-shod gauntlets gripped his belt and yanked him back. Ser Thorn Morland, Eastwatch's master-at-arms, face streaked with soot and oil. "The dead don't tire," Morland growled. "Neither do we." He hurled a jar of wildfire onto the ice. Green flames roared up, licking at the dead's advance. For a blessed heartbeat, the line wavered. Somewhere below, a walker raised its elaborate horn of burnished bone. The note that spilled forth was not sound but sensation, a vibration that ran through stone and blood alike. Flames guttered. The wildfire's viridian tongue shrank to withered embers, snuffed out by an unnatural, ruinous cold. Derek felt his hope crack like thin ice. He staggered. Morland shoved him aside as a spear of frost arced overhead, impaling the wall's Merlin in a plume of shattered ice. Where the spear struck, the stone blackened with frostblight, crumbling to powder. "Fall back to the inner yard." Flint's roar cut above the wind. "Seal the gate." Men retreated in ragged order, dragging wounded, kicking over braziers to slow pursuit. The dead flooded the parapet in silence. Eastwatch's east wall was lost. Benjen Stark's relief column arrived at dawn's third hour to find the landward postern already overrun. Ragged, blue-eyed corpses prowled the killing field between outer and inner gates, picking through shattered shields. The horses balked at the stench of rot and snow.
Benjen Wildkost, signaling a halt.
Behind him rode the brothers of Castle Black. 60 men in black cloaks, half as many again in small-folk conscripts, armed with dragonglass daggers scavenged from hard-home barrows and torch poles wrapped in oily rags. It looked a poor force to stem an ancient darkness. A hunched figure stepped from the ruined gate. His cloak was ragged crimson, cloth torn from an old ranger's banner, and his helm bore antlers carved of dogwood. "Mance Raider," Benjen called. Raider shoved his hood back. His dark eyes blazed with wild intensity, though flecks of frost clung like stars in his beard. "Ben Stark," he croaked. "Thought you'd ride glacial winds themselves if it meant a tale for the minstrels. What news?" "Eastwatch bleeds." The walkers broke the outer ring before the third bell. Flint's cut off with a half-score men in the rookery tower. Raider's gaze fell on the relief host, and even in the gloom Benjen saw despair flicker. "You've brought lambs to a butcher's hall. We have fire and glass. Hope you've enough for 100,000 dead." Benjen gripped Raider's shoulder. "We need to breach. If Flint holds the inner yard, we can still hold the castle until Corgyle's second wave arrives." "Lord Commander rides with 200 from the Shadow Tower," Raider said. 3 days behind, if they live to reach the Kingsroad postern." He spat. 3 days might as well be 3 centuries. The wall loomed beyond, throwing a shadow across the killing field. Benjen slid from Ghost's saddle, drawing his dragonglass-edged long sword. The obsidian caught weak dawn light and shimmered crimson at its core, as though the blade still remembered the fire that birthed it. He pointed the tip toward the gate. "On me," he said. The first dead things lunged as they crossed the threshold. Benjen swung, shearing a wight's arm clean at the shoulder. It disintegrated where it fell, black smoke swirling away. A second corpse clamped rotten fingers around Benjen's helm rim. Raider split its skull with a bone-hilted axe, freeing him. The brothers behind surged forward, shouting oaths of the first men. Dragonglass punched through bloated torsos and shattered skulls like brittle pottery. The corpses collapsed to ash, clearing a path toward the tower. The wall of mist hung over the inner yard, swirling about the rookery like a shroud. Flint's men still held the upper parapets. Benjen glimpsed Derek Pike flinging pitch from a broken bucket, his face scorched raw from frostbite. But the grave tide pressed upward, piling corpse upon corpse at the base of the tower stair. A pair of walkers strode among them, their footfalls leaving silver cracks in the flagstones. Benjen broke into a sprint, Raider and 20 men hard at his heels. They crashed into the corpse pile. Ash exploded into the air, so cold it burned. Benjen hacked a path toward the stairs, then felt the sudden hush of a walker's presence behind him. He wheeled just in time to parry a sweep of the ice blade. The impact numbed his hands through leather and mail. Frost bloomed along his sword's guard. The walker's eyes were the color of hard ice. Deep, ancient, remorseless. Slashed again. Ben-Jen ducked, felt the blade has passed. Freezing droplets of sweat in midair. He swung low, dragonglass edge kissing the walker's knee. Cracks splintered outward, but the thing did not bleed. Instead, it emitted a sound like breathing glass and raised its sword for the killing blow. A horn blast cut the air. The castle's war horn, deep and thunderous. Flint had reached the parapet above with a great horn slung across his back, and as he blew again, the very stones seemed to shake. Distracted, the walker glanced upward. Raider vaulted a fallen mantlet, flung a dragonglass knife. The blade buried itself to the hilt in the walker's throat. Blue flame guttered in its eyes. The creature burst like ice beneath a smith's hammer, shards cascading in crystalline rain. Ben-Jen gasped lungfuls of frost. The death of their master sent a ripple through the dead ranks. Half-rotted limbs stiffened, movements lagged. "Press!" he shouted. They climbed step by bloody step until they reached the rookery door. Inside, Derek and 3 remaining archers guarded Flint, who stood heaving at the horn, face purple with exertion. Maester Ronald lay slumped against the wall, his spectacles crusted white. Flint broke the horn's seal to greet Ben-Jen. "Took you long enough." Ben-Jen clapped his arm. "Save your breath." He turned to Raider. "Signal the outer yard. Light every torch." Raider jabbed a finger to the Ravencoat. "Cages are empty. Birds are away. Then we ride flame ourselves," Ben-Jen said. He knelt beside Maester Ronald, pried the man's satchel open. Inside nestled 3 vials of wildfire, smaller than prayer candles, yet potent. Ben-Jen pocketed them. "We break the frost, flush those walkers into the open, then bring them down with spears of dragonglass. Ronald, can you stand?" The maester's teeth rattled audibly. "I have another way." All eyes turned. The old man pushed himself upright, trembling. During the reign of King Jaehaerys, the Alchemists' Guild stored pails of frozen wildfire within Eastwatch's undercellars. Precaution against Greyjoy raids. It remains there still, encased beneath dragonsteel lids. "If we could reach it." "We collapsed the tower," Flint finished, sudden understanding flickering in his eyes. Ben-Jen nodded. "Bring winter down upon winter." They set to work. While archers on the roof kept the dead at distance, Ben-Jen led Raider and Derek through narrow servant passages descending beneath the rookery. The tower's bones groaned with the cold. Frost lanced through mortar as though searching for warmth to devour. They found the undercellar sealed by a rusted grate. Derek hammered at the lock until it split, iron made brittle by unnatural cold. Inside waited a single iron trunk rimmed with Valyrian glyphs. A thin sheen of hoarfrost glistened upon its flanks. Ben-Jen pried the lid. The interior exhaled a gust of steam so cold it stung like flame. Within nestled 6 spheres no larger than goose eggs, each carved of opaque glass alive with swirling emerald storms. "Gods have mercy," Raider whispered. "None will come," Ben-Jen reminded him. He lifted one sphere gingerly, then another. Each weighed no more than feathers, yet crackled ominously in his hands. "We plant them at the stair, in crevices beneath support beams. Fire we cannot trust here. But weight and time will shatter these shells, and when they do..." "Clouds of green frost," Derek breathed. "A fire that burns cold." They arranged the spheres, embedding them in cracks along the tower's base. Then they withdrew, climbing quickly for the parapet. Below, the dead surged anew, drawn by the scent of living flesh. The second walker strode at their fore. Its eyes tracked Ben-Jen as he emerged onto the rooftop, as though recognizing the architect of its brother's demise. Ben-Jen raised the horn and blew a single blast. Flint took up the cry, echoing the call along the crumbling battlements. Retreat. The watch's men withdrew across rope ladders flung between towers. The walkers advanced unchallenged, sensing blood wind ahead. The second one stepped upon the threshold just as the first sphere cracked beneath its heel. A whisper of emerald vapor poured from the fissure. The walker paused. It lifted its foot, turned those frost-blue eyes downward. Benjen felt, rather than heard, the shell's hushed sigh as wildfire met unnatural cold. The explosion was soundless, a pulse of green aurora that imploded rather than erupted. Then the rookery tower folded inward upon itself like parchment in a bonfire, stone and timber dissolving into a vortex of viridian frost. A spear of brilliant green shot skyward, piercing the clouded dawn. The walker disintegrated in a shower of crystal flakes. The dead froze in motion, frozen footwear welding to the ground. They collapsed like puppets whose strings had been severed. Silence fell thicker than snow. Benjen staggered back, ears ringing with the absence of sound. He met Flint's gaze across the gap where the tower had been. The first ranger's beard was rimmed in living jade flame that sputtered and died. The brothers of Castle Black watched in stunned awe as the sea mist recoiled, churning like a wounded beast. Perched upon the horizon, the great wave of shadow that had heralded the walker's arrival seemed to falter, diffusing as though some tether had been cut. But Benjen sensed no triumph. The tower was gone, yes, and the dead stilled. But in the depths of that silent mist he felt an eye open, vast, cold, ancient. Something unseen shifted far beyond Eastwatch, as if the very heartbeat of winter had skipped a beat. Flint gathered the men. "Burn every corpse," he ordered. "Every last bone." Benjen stared eastward, across the ruins of the shattered shore to where the sea had frozen into 1,000-faceted panes. There, on the farthest edge of sight, a figure moved, tall as a keep, skin like moonstone, coronet of ice pitched upon its brow. With each step, it turned the dawn light to shrouded dusk. Benjen felt its gaze like a knife in his mind. "What is it?" Raider asked. "The Night King," Benjen whispered, "and he is only beginning." In the south, the flames of rebellion raged unchecked. Robert Baratheon marshaled his banners along the Blackwater. Ned Stark marched from the Neck. Tywin Lannister's host burned the Riverlands. Yet none beyond the wall knew the truer doom that stirred. Ravens from Eastwatch reached Castle Black, and Lord Commander Corgyle dispatched warnings to Winterfell and White Harbor. But ravens can be shot or lost, their messages dismissed as panic. Across the miles of Seven Kingdoms, men sharpened steel for a war of crowns, never dreaming a crown of ice approached that none could wear. At Winterfell, Maester Whaley's Baron frowned over the parchment from the wall. He found a young girl in the Godswood, a child of barely 9, auburn hair and bright eyes. "You must run, my lady," he urged. "Find your brother at Riverrun. Plead with him to send men north."
Lyanna Stark scowled.
Benjen worries too much. He chases stories meant for long nights round the hearth. "Then why does my candle feel colder?" The maester murmured, but the girl had already darted away, trusting in youth's immortality. Kings and lords played their games. In the Tower of Joy, Lyanna Stark labored in childbirth beneath a weirwood's pale shadow, unaware that her brother's younger namesake fought shadows that walked. In the dungeons below the Red Keep, Aerys Targaryen muttered of wildfire, hearing distant echoes of the green frost that had devoured Eastwatch's tower. He called it an omen, fire answering fire. And in the far north, on the weeping ramparts of the wall, Benjen Stark watched the ruin of Eastwatch smolder and thought of stories old Nan told by firelight. Stories of the long night when the sun hid its face for a generation, when the snow fell so deep it buried cities, and dead things hunted living by starlight alone. He had thought them tales for children. Now he knew better. Flint came to stand at his side. Dawn had fully broken, weak and pale, but no sunlight touched Benjen's skin. "If the wall holds," Flint said, "we can rebuild Eastwatch." Benjen shook his head. "It is not Eastwatch I fear will fall. You saw what the wildfire did. I saw a fraction of his power meet a spark and recoil. He will adapt." Flint's jaw clenched. "Then we adapt faster." Footsteps crunched behind. Raider approached with Derek, each bearing a sack of dragonglass shards recovered from beneath the rubble. They spilled them on a frost-cracked table. Spearheads, daggers, arrowheads. Not enough for a war. Ben-Jen took one arrowhead, turning it between thumb and forefinger. The obsidian seemed to drink light. Raider met his gaze. Winter never plays a single tune, Ben. It comes as storms, hunger, plague, silence. Today was silence. Tomorrow may be storms. We must warn the realm. Realms at war with itself. By the time they finish counting casualties, the wall may be dust. Raider's eyes glittered with defiance. Which is why I'm going over. Flint bristled. Desertion. Raider smiled thinly. Call it reconnaissance. North of the wall, the free folk know paths through the haunted forest none of you have walked. If the Night King marches a host south, I'll feel its tremor days before his shadow kisses your ramparts. Ben-Jen considered. You'll need supplies. I'll take speed instead. He clapped Ben-Jen's shoulder. If I live, ravens will come with me. If I die, he shrugged. Try not to waste the sacrifice. He turned, slipping into the mist like smoke. Flint exhaled. You trust him. I trust his desire to live, Ben-Jen said, and his pride. He won't let the dead claim him easily. He stared east once more. The great figure on the horizon had vanished into the wreathing fog. Yet Ben-Jen felt its presence still, an incense of cold that lingered behind the eyes, whispering of graves yet to be hollowed. The watch would hold, or die, but Ben-Jen Stark swore upon ice and iron that the Night King would not pass unchallenged. He tightened gloved fingers around the blackstone of his sword's hilt, feeling in its brittle warmth the last embers of the first men's defiance. Winter had come too early, wearing a crown of rime, but so long as one man stood vigil, the world would not kneel to the dead. Far beyond the world of men, beneath vaults of broken starlight, the Night King paused upon a ridge of ice overlooking the sea. He could still taste the sting of green frost where the Rookery Tower had died, ash mingling with sorcery older than dragons. It amused him. The living were always so eager to burn themselves to spite the cold. He lifted a hand. Frost and snow danced upon unseen currents, forming a sigil of spirals in the air. At its center flickered a shard of green. With a thought, he crushed it. The sigil collapsed in silent thunder. Far below, upon the sea's tempered glass, shapes stirred. Huge, ponderous, ancient. Ice cracked as something vast moved beneath. Frozen leviathans he had raised from abyssal graves in a time before men spoke. They answered his summons, breaching like slow breaking dawns. Water froze around them, forming living bridges of ice that pointed south toward the wall, toward the low stone keep of Eastwatch where flickers of mortal fire still mourned. Let them rebuild, he thought. Let them forge swords of black glass. Let them summon kings and dragons and wildfire. Winter is patient. Winter waits. He turned away, cloak of night trailing behind him like the tattered membrane of some forgotten wing, and began his long march toward the wall. This time he would not come alone. The dawn that followed the greenlit night over Eastwatch by the sea came pale and bloodless, like a wounded thing that crawled from its bed only because it must. Ash still drifted on the wind, odd flakes of jade that would not melt, even when they settled upon a brazier's throat of coals. And the smell was neither smoke nor char but something stinging and metallic, as if the air itself had taken a wound. Ben-Jen Stark walked the shattered parapets with cautious steps, testing each frost-cracked stone before trusting his weight to it. Much of the curtain wall nearest the rookery had sheared away in the silent explosion. Where turrets once stood, only jagged fangs remained, jutting skyward against the paling heavens. Yet men still worked among the ruin, black cloaks flapping like crows as they hauled blocks of ice-bitten masonry back into place. They had no mortar, only slush, pitch, and stubborn hearts, but they labored without complaint. For Eastwatch must not resemble a corpse if hope were to linger. Derek Pike moved among them, his right hand bandaged in linen and pine resin salve. Every so often he paused to ease a stone into position with his left shoulder, setting his teeth against the pain. When Ben-Jen called him aside, he bowed his head, as a beaten hound might bow to its master's hand. Rest, Ben-Jen said. Your fingers will not knit if you treat them so. My fingers won't matter if the wall falls, Derek answered, but he did nurse the wrapped hand beneath his armpit as he spoke. Besides, the pain reminds me I'm alive. Ben-Jen sensed there was more behind those words than the young man dared voice and chose not to pry. Some horrors were best swallowed in silence, else they broke the ribs that caged them. So he changed the subject. Any sound from Flint? Aye. He's closed what's left of the postern and set a double watch. Says the hoarfrost on the hinges refuses to thaw, even with torches. Maester Ronald thinks it may be sorceress. Ben-Jen grunted. Sorcery or no, we cannot hold Eastwatch with 23 men. 22, Derek corrected softly. Ser Thorn Morland died at dawn. The cold rot reached his lungs. The news fell like a hammer on Ben-Jen's heart. Morland had been a hard man, stern as the wall itself, but courage had blazed in him brighter than wildfire. Ben-Jen pressed a fist to his chest in quiet salute. The pyres, already raised beyond the outer ring. We used the last of the lamp oil, but no body will feed the walkers. Ben-Jen looked seaward. The shivering sea lay flat and mirrored, still sheathed in a skin of black glass where the Night King's advance had frozen it. No new mist crawled upon its surface, yet the silence of that water was somehow worse than any storm. Felt like a thing waiting patient as deep time. He turned back toward the broken tower. I must ride for Castle Black. Corgyle needs a full account before he marches another step. Derek's brow furrowed. And Eastwatch. Flint commands in my stead. We hold fast behind what stone remains and pray the cold stays idle. The Night King took a wound last night, small perhaps, but a wound all the same. He will lick it before striking again. Derek's lips twitched in something that might have been a smile. If he possesses a tongue. Every monster does. It just speaks in ways men seldom hear. They parted without ceremony. In such times, words of farewell felt wasteful. Ben-Jen descended the spiral stair that had survived and emerged into the bailey, where horses stamped nervously in fresh-packed snow. Ghost awaited, white vapor pluming from his nostrils. Raider materialized from between two gutted barracks, a ragged bundle of furs across his arm. For the road. He thrust the bundle forward, 6 dragonglass arrowheads bound to pine shafts. Found these in a dead ranger's footlocker. He won't need them now. Ben-Jen weighed one arrow in his gloved palm, testing its balance. Join me. Raider shook his head. I meant what I said. I'll range north, follow the Frostfang passes. If I can keep eyes on the dead while you muster south, perhaps we pinch the bastard between us. You go alone? Raider's grin was thin as the edge of a snow shovel. The Hornfoot girl Stenny will shadow me. She sees better at night than most men see at noon. Besides, the free folk will scatter unless one of their own calls them. They won't rally to a crow's banner. Ben-Jen clasped his forearm. Watch your back. Even the living north of the wall may not see you as friend. They don't, Raider admitted, but they will see the walkers as worse. With that, he vanished into the wreck of the eastern gate, and Ben-Jen mounted Ghost, gathering the hood of his cloak tight. The dawn light had brightened from bloodless gray to a brittle pearl, but no heat rode with it. Somewhere beyond the wall's shadow, a raven croaked once, a hoarse, broken sound. It seemed less a herald than a warning. Ben-Jen spurred Ghost westward, toward the narrow road that crawled beneath the wall's southern face. As hoofbeats echoed among ice canyons of the wall and wind, the thought came unbidden. Winter is patient, but so is the north. 14 leagues south, at Moat Cailin, Rob Baratheon stood on the ramparts of the Greywater Gatehouse, staring north with furrowed brow. The damp air smelled of peat and marsh rot, and green banners of mist curled above stagnant pools. The moat itself was near impregnable, a ring of crumbling towers seated upon islands of stone amid treacherous bogs. Rob preferred open fields and the tumult of honest battle, yet necessity tethered him here, for this choke point was all that held his rebellion's spine together. Maester Morgan ascended the stair and halted beside him, breathless. A raven from Winterfell, my lord. Rob broke the seal, expecting some clever counsel from his friend Ned. Instead, only a few lines in Benjen Stark's hand greeted him. White shadows. Eastwatch breached. Night King stirring. Send help. He read the words twice, then a third time, each pass driving chill deeper into his marrow. What game is this? He murmured. Morgan adjusted his spectacles. A jest, perhaps? No, Rob's brows knit tighter. Benjen Stark is no jester. If he writes of white shadows, he means the others of old tales. Yet those tales belong to children. Children grow, my lord, and tales sometimes keep pace. Rob exhaled slowly. The rebellion against Ares already strained his forces. Holding the neck demanded nearly every spear he could spare. Yet if the walkers truly stirred in the far north, the fate of thrones would matter little beside the fate of mankind. He turned toward the swamplands where distant drums of crickets rattled like bones. Dispatch riders to Riverrun and Storm's End both. Tell them the north may need more than songs and prayers. And if they doubt the word, then remind them that Robert's rebellion began with a lie about Lyanna Stark's honor, and yet half the realm bleeds for that lie. Shall we bleed less for the truth? A gust of brackish wind answered where Morgan could not. Atop the wall's central heights, Lord Commander Herrick Corgyle paced the stone shelf outside his solar, his white cloak snapping in the frigid air. His relief column had marched only 4 leagues from Shadow Tower before the news reached him. Eastwatch mauled, Benjen Stark holding with a handful, green fire seen from Winterfell's towers. The old knight's rage smoldered behind his steady demeanor. He turned as Benjen approached and seized him in a rough embrace. "Damn you for stealing my glory," he growled, though his voice trembled with gratitude. "But the wall yet stands because you risked more than orders allowed." Benjen accepted the scolding with bowed head. "If I'd delayed, there'd be no wall to defend." Corgyle released him, motioning to a long pine table strewn with maps. Wax candles guttered in the cold draft, pooling puddles of grease that congealed before they could drip. "Tell it from the start." Benjen spoke for near half an hour, recounting every breath of Eastwatch's fall. The mist, the walkers, the living tide of corpses, the fire that burned cold, the tower eaten by green frost. When he finished, silence spread like a stain across the chamber. Finally, Maester Roderick cleared his throat. "Wildfire frozen yet aflame? Alchemists claim such a marriage impossible." "Impossible was the walker's tread upon the sea," Benjen retorted. Corgyle tapped the map with a gloved forefinger. "If the Night King presses again, he will not warn us with mist and trumpets. Eastwatch is wounded, yes, but it can still draw breath. We must reinforce." "My riders are spent," Benjen said. "Castle Black will send 200. The Shadow Tower another 100. We'll scrape every builder and steward able to wield steel, place them upon the Eastwatch parapets. And we will pray." Benjen hesitated. "With respect, my lord, we cannot fill gaps with prayers alone. We need dragonglass and steel inscribed with the runes of the first men, if those runes carry power." Roderick's gray brows rose. "Runic steel exists only in dusty folios." "Then dust them off," Corgyle snapped. "If Eastwatch's fate rests on a scribble, I'll see every maester in the Citadel set quill to blade." He pressed both palms to the table, steadying the tremor in his aged limbs. "Send ravens to Winterfell, White Harbor, Bear Island, even to distant Skagos. We petition every mine, every holdfast. Carve out any dragonglass vein. Offer coin, honors, lands, whatever moves their hearts." Benjen inhaled. "And the South?" A sour laugh escaped Corgyle. "Let Robert and Ares strangle one another. We have a darker crown to consider." Benjen bowed, though weight settled in his gut. In the weeks ahead, their black cloaks would fray under burdens thicker than snow. Some would snap, but he could not voice doubt now. Doubt was for the hearth, duty for the cold. The Night King's stag-skull crown glittered with frost as he led his host through the veil carved by melting glaciers, unseen by mortal eyes. Sunlight slanted between knife-edged peaks, but its warmth fled before him. With each slow step, Frost feathers spread across rock and scree. Dead things followed. Giants with ribs lay bare where carrion birds had long ago feasted, mammoths half flesh, half ice dragging broken tusks, wolves whose pelts glimmered silver with hoarfrost. Yet there were living followers as well, wildlings enslaved by fear rather than sorcery. Atop a crag huddled then warriors, their bronze helms rimed white, watching the Night King's passage. They had seen the mist swallow dozens of tribes in the haunted forest. They had watched their dead kin rise blue-eyed and silent. So they knelt as he passed, shivering not from cold alone but from something deeper, a chill that drank courage and left only obedience. The Night King paused, empty eyes turning toward a hunched figure among them. It was the Magnar Aruel, old and scar-creased, once proud in hammered bronze breastplate. Now he knelt among his people but lifted his gaze with defiance unquenched. "Why?" the Magnar rasped, voice clattering like stones in a jar. "Why break the world?" The Night King tilted his head. No breath smoked from him, no tongue shaped words, yet a soundless answer settled upon the Magnar's mind. The taste of endless night, the peace of stillness unbroken by heartbeats, the hush of snow falling upon unremembered graves. Aruel's mouth quivered. Blood trickled from his nostrils as the weight of that answer twisted something within. He bowed lower, forehead touching ice. Behind him, his warriors did the same. Satisfied, the Night King walked on, leaving their tears to freeze upon their cheeks. At Winterfell, Lyanna Stark sat astride her gelding beside the weirwood pool, crimson leaves drifting across black water. The note from Benjen had reached their maester only hours ago and now rested in Lyanna's satchel, heavy as iron despite its paltry weight. She had argued with her father, Lord Ricard, until her voice cracked. "Send men north," she'd pleaded. "Send me to Moat Cailin to speak with Robb." But the Lord of Winterfell would not loosen a single spear while Baratheon banners flew south. Too many oaths, too many enemies. So Lyanna prepared to ride alone. She wore no plate, only mail beneath wolf furs, but her eyes burned with a Stark's fire. In secret, she unrolled the parchment again, studying Benjen's script. Night King stirring. Send help. She pictured her little brother on a lone wall walk, scourged by ice wind, refusing to tremble for fear the men might see. Shadowed memories of childhood hunts surfaced. Benjen laughing as he pulled her to her feet after she slipped on river ice, promising never to tell father. She owed him, and the North owed more still, to itself, to every tale old Nan had ever whispered of the long night. A crunch of snow behind. Brandon Stark, her eldest brother, strode into the grove, red leaves drifting about his shoulders. He carried the sword ice sheathed across his back. "You mean to ride?" "I mean to do more than recite prayers," Lyanna shot back. Brandon's jaw flexed. He seemed both proud and furious in a single breath. "The North bleeds already. If you vanish, Father will tear down half the castles seeking you. Then let him send those knights north instead of south," she answered. "Let them defend our true foe." Brandon sighed. "Father sees the 7 kingdoms as webs. Tug one thread and the rest may unravel. He thinks Robert's war can be ended swiftly. Spare lives, prevent famine, bring peace." Lyanna shoved the parchment toward him. "There is no peace in this." Brandon read, eyes narrowing. "If this is true, Robert's crown will mean nothing. It was never meant to." A silence stretched, filled by the weirwood's gentle susurrus. Brandon at last unsheathed ice, laying it across his palms. "Then we ride together. If Father would call it treason, let him forgive us when his realm still stands come spring." Lyanna's relief swelled, mingling with fear. "The southern lords may brand us deserters. Let them. A desert is better than a grave of frozen ash." Brandon whistled for his squire. "Have the smith set fresh edge to my spear, and pack salted pork enough for a fortnight." Lyanna pressed her forehead to her brother's. "The gods watch over fools. Then we are well protected." Before nightfall they were gone. 2 Stark children with 3 sworn swords and hearts heavy with knowledge few would believe. North, always north. The road beckoned with snow-flecked promises. King Aerys II Targaryen stood at the window of the Red Keep's tallest tower, staring at nothing. His beard was ragged, his nails long, stained with the oil he spread upon his skin to repel unseen assassins. Yet no assassin plagued his thoughts now. He muttered of cold green flame and towers falling silent in the night. More wildfire, he whispered to Grand Maester Pycelle, who stood at cautious distance. We must seed the city deeper, beneath the dragon pit and the street of silk under every September. When the usurpers come, we will drown them in dragons born of emerald. Pycelle bowed, white beard sweeping marble tile. As your grace commands. Yet the guild of alchemists begs patience. Stores run thin. Then use cold fire, Aerys hissed, eyes rolling. The fire that froze Eastwatch. I see it, green as envy, cold as death. The last dragon wears frost upon his scales. Pycelle's stomach tightened. Rumors of Eastwatch's fall had reached King's Landing only hours ago, borne by a raven that arrived half mad, half dead. The small council dismissed it as northern fancy, yet something in the king's mania drew strength from the tale. My king, Pycelle ventured. This cold fire belongs to phantoms. We know only the alchemist's art. Aerys clutched his own arms, nails drawing beads of red through oiled skin. Find me the phantom, then. If the wall is cracked, the world must burn. Pycelle retreated, shaken. He was no coward to rumor, but the way the king spoke of frost-green fire raised gooseflesh. And if the Night King truly walked, perhaps flame would be the realm's last refuge. Night drifted down upon Castle Black like a shroud of black velvet sewn with dying stars. Benjen stood upon the king's tower, hood down, hair whipping his cheeks. Far below, smiths worked through darkness, forging spearheads of dragonglass. The stones hissed when touched to water, bleeding steam scented of brimstone. War horns moaned across the yards, drilling men to new posts. When at last the din quieted, Benjen heard footsteps behind him. He turned to find Dennis Mallister of the Shadow Tower, armor still dusty from the long march. Silver threads of moonlight traced the lines of worry across his brow. I bring word, Mallister said without preamble. For ravens returned from the south, one from Moat Cailin, one from Storm's End, two from the Eyrie. All speak of whispers, rumors of pale shadows, but refuse to commit men. Lords argue they cannot spare strength while rebellion blazes. Benjen's shoulders sagged. So the wall stands alone. Not alone. Mallister produced a weather-stained scroll. Lady Meage Mormont sends this. The she-bear does not flee the snow. We come with 10 longships and 50 spears carved from obsidian. Hold fast. A faint smile crept across Benjen's lips. The women of Bear Island shame us all. Mallister's own smile echoed. I fear they'll shame the dead before long. He left Benjen to the night. Silence returned. Only the distant clang of hammers punctured it. Benjen rested his gloved hands on the frost-slick Merlin. His gaze drifted northward, past the infinite nothing, to where he imagined Raider stalking pale forests beneath unfriendly moons. Hold fast, he whispered to the dark. Hold fast, you bloody fool. Raider crouched beneath a fallen spruce in the Frostfang foothills, breath clouding the air. Stenny Hornfoot knelt beside him, fingertips pressed to crusted snow. A half-frozen birch glade spanned the valley floor, silver light streaming through skeletal branches. Voices drifted upon the wind, ragged chants, guttural syllables carved from old tongues. Raider motioned. They inched forward through snowdrifts until the glade opened before them. There, between twisted birch trunks, shambled a procession of dead. At its head strode a walker draped in tattered pelts of direwolf and snow bear, iceblade held aloft. The dead bore bundles on their shoulders, great fur-wrapped cocoons. At intervals they would pause, lower the bundles, slash them open. Infant wails punctured the stillness. Raider's guts tightened. The walkers pressed claw-like fingers to small brows, and the cries ceased. Within seconds, blue fire kindled in tiny eyes. The procession advanced, leaving behind only empty swaddlings stained with frost and blood. Stenny's face twisted in horror. She mouthed a curse to the old gods. Raider laid a hand upon her arm. They could do nothing for the babes, not 2 hearts against a host. Yet this sight itself was worth 10,000 swords. The Night King was not only raising the dead, he was forging new weapons from living flesh. Raider withdrew silently, but as he turned, a single twig snapped beneath his heel. The walker's head jerked. White eyes locked on Shadow. Raider froze. The walker lifted one gaunt hand, index finger extended. A sliver of ice whistled through the birches, driving into the tree trunk inches from Raider's cheek. Stenny hurled a spear of dragonglass. It struck the walker's breastplate, shattering like brittle coal. The creature reeled not at all. Instead, it raised a horn carved from mammoth femur. Raider seized Stenny's wrist. Run! They plunged through thigh-deep drifts as the horn's note split the night, a keening so high it felt like teeth cracking inside their skulls. Snow shook from limbs of pines. Far behind, the dead quickened their pace. Raider's lungs burned. He dared one glance over his shoulder and saw the walker still pursuing, unhurried, remorseless. It glided rather than walked, sliding across snow without footprints. Blue light spilled from its eyes, illuminating branches in ghost glow. They burst from the tree-line onto a frozen stream. Raider skidded, boots clawing for traction. South, he gasped. Find Ben. Stenny's breath wheezed. Streams thin. He understood. The stream ice echoed hollowly under their weight. Raider drew his bone knife and slashed at the surface. Crack, crack. Water gurgled beneath. The dead reached the bank, skeletal fingers outstretched. A giant white lumbered forward, foot stomp fracture rippling the ice. With a roar, Raider plunged his knife again. Water erupted, black and icy. He seized Stenny's arm, hauling her into the current. The shock lanced like knives through bone. They were swept beneath a low shelf where air pockets lingered. Raider pressed lips to a crack, drinking breath that tasted of mold and death. Above the ice, blue faces peered. The walker raised its blade, stabbing downward. Ice shattered where the tip struck, but the force missed Raider by inches. Water dragged him and Stenny along a subterranean chute. They bumped off rocks, lungs screaming, until the stream spat them into a cavern where stalactites of glassy frost hung like dragon teeth. Raider crawled onto a gravel bar, coughing brine. Stenny collapsed beside him, shuddering. They lay there in darkness, listening. No horn call found them. Only the river's muted sob filled the chamber. When at last Raider gathered strength, he scraped a flint, coaxed a faint spark to life. Its orange glow quivered over cavern walls etched with runes older than the wall itself. Spirals, 7-pointed stars, shapes like shattered circles. What place is this? Stenny whispered. Raider touched one spiral, felt warm despite the air's chill. A memory stirred, old songs of caves where the children of the forest hid from giants and men. He glanced at Stenny, a place of older magic, perhaps older hope. Through frozen boots and drenched furs they would travel south again, but now burdened with knowledge heavier than soaked wool. The Night King forged armies not merely of those he slew, but of babes stolen breathing. If such dread could be loosed upon the realm before spring's breath returned, then every cradle in Westeros might someday rock blue-eyed sleepers. 3 weeks later, the she-bears of Bear Island arrived at Eastwatch amid sleet. Meege Mormont strode through the gate swinging a hammer taller than most men. She greeted Flint with a grin that bared all her teeth. You asked for 50 spears. I bring 75, and axes enough to clear the Wolfswood twice over. Flint's heart lifted for the first time since the tower fell. He led the she-bears along the ramparts, showing them the repair works, the scars upon the wall's face, the frozen gouges left by the walker's blades. Meege touched one such scar, and icicles snapped from her gauntlet. We patch, Flint said, but a tinder wind could crumble half of it. Then we shall stand where stone fails, Meege replied. Her daughters fanned out, testing gaps with spear points tipped in black glass. Their presence sparked new vigor in Eastwatch's weary garrison. At Castle Black, Corgyle drilled 300 new recruits, Small folk, poachers, second sons seeking pardon. Benjen worked among them day and night, teaching how to shatter bones with dragon glass, when to set fire, how to face fear without blinking. He carved spiral sigils into practice dummies to remind them of the enemy's mark. Each evening he climbed the wall alone, scanning the northern wastes. Some night stars shone undisturbed. Others, pale curtains of light danced on the horizon, rippling as though stirred by an invisible breath. On such nights Benjen felt the wall itself tense, as if the magic woven into its ice recognized a brother come to kill it. South of the neck, Robert Baratheon pressed toward the trident, banners snapping above him. Ned Stark rode at his side, face shadowed by more than helm. When Robert boomed songs of battle, Ned remained silent. At last, by campfire, Robert slapped a meaty hand upon Ned's shoulder. "You brood worse than a septa. Speak." Ned passed him the parchment from Benjen. Robert read it twice, flame flickering across his features. "White shadows," he scoffed. "Ned, I have shadows aplenty. The usurpers, the Tyrells, my own belly if I miss supper." Ned's voice was low. "My brother does not jest with nightmares." Robert poured wine from a skin. "Your brother sees snows and fancies phantoms. Listen, we win at the trident. I plant my hammer in Rhaegar's breast. Ares squeals, the realm bows. Then we'll march north if need be." "If need be," Ned echoed bitterly. "And if by then the need has devoured half the realm?" Robert's gaze softened. "I swear, mate, when this is done I'll follow you to the end of the world. But I can't fight two wars at once." Ned nodded, eyes reflecting firelight. Yet distrust lingered behind his silence. Distrust not of Robert's heart, but of time. Time answered at last in ice and blood. Deep in the Frostfangs, the Night King halted upon a stone bridge spanning a chasm where hot springs once flowed. He raised his hand. At his command, dead giants hauled a slab of onyx from sledges. They thrust it upright upon the bridge. Runes glimmered across its surface, older than first men, older than language. The Night King spread his fingers. Frost leapt from his palm, lacing the slab. Each rune brightened, fed by his power. Then, with slow inevitability, the slab cracked. Not shattered, but opened. A door born of night and sorrow, yawning blacker than black. From within stepped creatures that had no names in the tongues of Westeros. Towering silhouettes woven from shards of obsidian and ice, crowned with horns like stalactites. Their eyes burned aurora violet. They marched forth, each footstep imprinting spiral sigils that pulsed and faded. The Night King watched his new vanguard assemble. Storms gathered overhead, swirling about the chasm as if stirred by a giant's hand. Lightning flickered, froze in mid-flash, hung suspended as crystalline needles before winking out. He turned south. The wall stood invisibly beyond mountains and forest, a line drawn by cowards who believed stones and oaths could halt eternity. Soon, he would show them what eternity wrote when it set its quill to flesh. Benjen Stark jerked awake in his cot, sweat freezing upon his brow. A roar still echoed within his skull, like glaciers grinding together. He stumbled to the rampart. Night was moonless, yet the horizon burned with pale violet radiance. Columns of light speared skyward, swaying like the fingers of a ghastly hand. He ran for the war horn, one blast for wildlings, two for raiders. Tonight he raised it for neither. 3 blasts had sounded once in living memory. Tonight his lungs filled for 4. He blew, and the wall itself seemed to tremble, as if awakening from centuries of slumber. Men tumbled from bunks, scrambling, weapons clattering. Corgyle rushed onto the yard half-armored. What madness! Benjen's eyes remained fixed north. "A new dawn," he said, "and it wears the color of death." His breath smoked in the air, yet the smoke coiled downward, drawn toward the horizon, as though the world inhaled. And somewhere beyond sight, the Night King smiled, teeth glinting blue in eternal dark. 500 miles south, on the banks of the Trident, Rhaegar Targaryen dressed for battle in armor scaled like polished rubies. Dragons danced upon his breastplate, As Squires buckled his pauldrons, he paused, looking north. A tremor shivered across the water. The river's surface clouded in a sweeping ripple of frost that came and went in a blink. What was that?
Elias Kuzin, sejong kunintun, mutarat.
Rieger's violet eyes narrowed. A promise, he said, though he did not know of what kind. His mind wandered to songs sung of the prince who was promised, a dragon of ice and fire. He mounted. Drums beat. The battle that would decide crowns clashed like thunder. Yet above the din, some swore they heard a horn moan far to the north, its echo carried upon winds unseen. For mournful notes drifting across half a continent, the south fought on, ignorant of the note's meaning. But in Winterfell, Maester Whaleys felt the horn call vibrate through stone walls and dropped his quill. In Moat Cailin, Robb Baratheon paused mid-stride upon the battlements, the hairs on his arms rising. In the Eyrie, young Lisa Tully looked up from her embroidery and began to weep without knowing why. Each felt, for an instant, that something vast had stirred, something that cared for no banners, no honors, no songs. Night settled like an executioner's hood upon Benjen Stark. He stood upon the wall, eyes fixed on the violet glow that pulsed be.